Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Talkin Kids Health. I'm Beatriz Canals, live at Nicklaus Children's Hospital. Joining us today is Malvina Duncan. She is an injury prevention nurse with the trauma services here at Nicklaus Children's Hospital, as well as a Safe Kids coordinator for Miami-Dade. You stay busy.
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much for joining us. Malvina, you're pretty much the go-to for everything safety related with kids, so we're so grateful to have you here today. In the midst of summer, we're right in the thick of it. Kids have been home for quite a few weeks now.
Absolutely.
And it means we get to spend great time with them. It also means they have a little more time to get into trouble.
Absolutely.
Right? What is the most common injury that you see here in the ER that the team sees at Nicklaus Children's Hospital?
You know, year-round we see falls as being number one, but in the summer it's all about the opportunity. So we see a lot of injuries of opportunities, and it just augments what we normally see with falls. We see a lot of different types of mechanisms of injuries with falls, ranging from your babies all the way to your adolescents. So yeah, falls would be the number one thing. Now, having said that, the injuries that those falls can cause vary. Obviously, the size of the child, the mechanism of injury. When I say mechanism of injury, I mean the way they got hurt, whether it was a fall from a bicycle or whether it was, just a trip and fall type of thing. So yeah.
You mentioned the bicycle. I see kids in our neighborhood all summer long riding bikes with no helmets, no pads when they're skateboarding. I know it's so difficult to get them to wear it. When they're little, it's almost like you can put anything on them.
Right.
Then suddenly they reach the stage where they're going to fight you on it. Is that non-negotiable? Would that really prevent injuries?
I love the term non-negotiable because that's something that I use very much. And it's our insurance. Just like you and I have an insurance when we drive, the helmet and the pads are their insurance. Accidents happen. We all have our driver's license. We hope we're good drivers. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, you never know when an accident is going to happen. And that's why the helmets and the pads are so important. The pads are wonderful. And, you should, if you have them, go ahead and put it on. But a brain injury, there's no reason for that to happen when you have the equipment to prevent.
Absolutely. I know you brought some props with you.
Yes, I did.
We've got some helpers here that are going to hand this to us.
I know. So this is a common bicycle helmet. Mm-hmm. This helmet, when you put it on correctly, which is the key, okay, a lot of times what we see is that the helmets are like this. If they're wearing them, right? Like you said.
If they even have them on.
Right. They're tilted or even, crooked. And a lot of times they're not buckled. The helmet has to be buckled on because we don't want the child to fall one place and the helmet be at another, right?
Right, it wouldn't serve
counterproductive. So absolutely we want them to go ahead and put them on and buckle them on. You want it to be nice and snug. The helmet shouldn't wiggle on your head back and forth. Wherever you move the head, that's where the helmet should go.
So that's how you know that it's on properly.
Yes, absolutely. And there's other things, and you can always go ahead and go into our Facebook and our links to get.
Oh, that's great.
Yes,
you have the specifics of what you should look for.
Yes.
And something that I used, at least with our kids when they were little, is if you let them choose the helmet, take them with you. It has, cute little designs on them, then they feel they participated in it. Maybe it becomes more of a fashion statement for the girls, believe it or not, but they feel more comfortable in it and they're more likely to wear it.
Just like picking a bike,
right?
It should be just part of the equipment. And what you mentioned about the children when they're small, yes, you can pretty much put anything on them because they love to play dress up, right?
So true.
It's part. So if you have a child who's a small child and you're thinking, well, he only rides around the house, why do it? It's a matter of getting them used to the proper
So even if there is a major danger at home and you're watching them, it's a matter of just becoming part of the
absolutely.
routine.
Practice it, even if it's at home. And that's not to say that accidents cannot happen on, a little tricycle at home as well. So other than protection, but also making it a habit. And you get a lot less, fighting and nagging.
It's those teenagers, and I get it, but
what I tell teenagers? The little ones, they're going to fall from the seat down, right?
The fall is not as large.
Exactly. The older kids, you're going to have a little bit more risk-taking. You're pros, right?
Right.
So you go at a faster velocity, and when you fall harder.
That's where you see the serious injuries.
Even more so, the importance of that.
Well, we know they're going to be out there on their bikes. And we also know, if you've been out there at all this summer, it is so hot, and it's only going to get warmer because we're not even in August yet. So the danger there, of course, is exposure to sun and heat. Right. What should parents really do to keep their kids safe?
If at all possible, if you have a shaded area where the kids can play, That would be number one. Keep them hydrated, hydration, even in shaded areas, because the body just naturally gives off heat.
So don't assume that just because you're not directly in the sun, you don't need to hydrate.
Absolutely. Hydration would be number one. And then, of course, if you're out in the sun, you want to wear sunblock and protection. Now, there's a lot of different things out there that you can put on, and including long sleeves and things like that. As long as you're aware that it is a risk, you're reapplying. If you choose to do sunblock or sunscreen, you're reapplying as indicated, depending on the sunblock. A lot of people ask me, well, what is SPF? And I don't get into that, because the truth of the matter is they all do a good job if you reapply and keep them on the skin.
Now, when you do see kids come in, have you seen some that come in with just too much exposure to the sun?
Oh, absolutely.
So when should they go to the pediatrician or come in to the
Well,
hospital?
anytime that a child has been out in the sun and they come in and they just, they're not just tired, it's a little bit more than that. And your children.
Sure.
That's a good indication that you should keep an eye on them if they start throwing up, if they're profusely sweating, or they sweated a bunch and now they're not sweating at all. Okay,
That's an indication that something could be wrong.
Any difference in level of consciousness, that's
If they're lethargic or not
absolutely
responding well.
Yes.
Well, we know that in order to get out of the sun, one of the best ways to do that, especially here in South Florida, is a swimming pool. We have so many bodies of water. It's wonderful. It's one of the reasons why so many of us live here.
Yes.
We love it. But the danger, again, is with kids. And every year, especially in South Florida all year round, but especially in the summer, you hear of these deaths, drownings or near drownings. What are the warnings for parents?
So, with parents, when we talk about drowning, we talk about different things, because the little ones drown differently than the bigger kids. I shouldn't say differently, right? But where they're drowning, where we're seeing these. So the little ones, your ages 1 through 4, your curious little boys and girls, they're the ones drowning in the home swimming pool. Okay, so that's a one thing that we want to make sure that we speak to the parent, even if the child knows how to swim. We want supervision. Supervision is number one, because let's say something does happen, and remember, adults drown.
Sure.
So you can catch a cramp, you can get tired, whatever the case is, you're not feeling well. Even the scare of just falling. Sometimes a child that can swim goes in the water and all of a sudden doesn't know what to do.
So accidentally falls in or is pushed in, and then they react differently.
Exactly. They swallow a little bit of water, and then we get into trouble. With the older kids, what we see is the drownings are more common in the beaches, or canals or lakes, and again with that risk factor, right? And then we tend to, with the older ones, not supervise as much. We think, oh, they know how to swim, but again, they're risking a little bit more in the sense that they're just risk takers, natural adolescents.
True.
So we want to make sure that they know that don't dive into an area of water that you don't know. You don't know what's right underneath the surface. It might be a rock, and then from a simple dive, instead of it just being great fun, we have a head injury, and then you drown as a consequence to that.
And as we know with teenagers, it's a great opportunity, I think, as a parent, to have a conversation with them, right? Just bring it up, because they're just living life and they're not thinking of the consequence.
Exactly.
So maybe if it's something as simple as sit them down, have a conversation, and just tell them, keep this in the back of your mind. Be extra careful when you're out there. Have fun, but be cautious.
Right. And, be the voice of reason. If, you're with a group and we're all going to be doing something,
Listen to that little voice in you.
Sometimes just listen and then put it out there, because maybe 2 or 3 of your friends are thinking the same thing and they don't say it, and that just makes the majority, and you move on. So definitely not fall into that. Now, something that I did want to say about drowning in general is we address it with barriers. Okay, obviously supervision, and when we talk about supervision, we're talking about active supervision. On the cell phone, reading a book. I know it's nice for us as parents to have that relaxed time, but you don't want to take a chance.
Absolutely
Some
not.
of these tragedies happen even when adults are, a couple of feet away.
Most of them.
So, exactly.
It's crazy.
I love that I don't have to go because you know so much about the subject matter. The truth of the matter is that, drowning is silent. We all assume that we're going to hear big splashing and, help. That doesn't really happen. That's something that, is put in the movies so that we can all look at that. But the truth of the matter is that drowning is silent. And then when we're out in the pool and we're all having a great time, we get used to the splashing anyway. So what would alert that splash,
How would you know the difference
in that child?
to just kids having fun?
Exactly. So supervision, active supervision at that. The second one would be put physical barriers, meaning, that alarm, that gate, anything like that.
So the alarm, that's a great one. The alarm on the doors. That way you know if a child has stepped out of the home.
Exactly. And it shouldn't be the same as your home alarm. Your home alarm will beep, so that it doesn't disturb you. It kind of just notice. This should be a little higher chirp.
Something that's going to stand out.
Exactly. So that you know that that's that back door that's going straight into that pool.
Pool fence.
So, pool fence, absolutely. And, they don't work if we don't have them closed. So leaving things that entice kids or in and around or steps into the pool area and all that.
It has to be completely sealed.
It's completely sealed, something that an adult needs to open. And then you teach your child, because like you said with the teenagers, it's just a reminder. They get out of there doing the right thing. They're going to go ahead and get some water, let's say, right? Yeah, well, that little one wants to do exactly what they're doing.
They're going to follow.
In that blink of an eye,
that's how it happens.
It can happen. Yeah, and more than that, obviously, we always want to talk about swim lessons. We want every child to know how to swim.
If you live in South Florida, it has to be a given.
It's a safety thing.
Even if you don't have a pool in your own home.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to go to so many communities here.
How many communities don't have pools? We have canals in the backs of
all around us.
It's definitely one of those things that we definitely want to talk about. And, like you said, remind the kids to have them in the back of their head. And other than the swimming lessons, we always want to talk also about the parents knowing CPR. Because, let's say something does happen. Well, knowing what to do can save that child's life. Obviously we want to call it professionals, but whatever we can do in that moment, that may make the difference. It might make the difference not only in the injury suffered, but it can make the difference between life and death.
And also refresher courses when it comes to CPR, because I remember when our son was born, he's 15 now. We took CPR classes, but I have to be honest, I haven't had a refresher class since then. He's old enough now where he won't need it, but I have nieces and nephews that are around the house.
Well, and then, what, as well, that 15-year-old can get involved and make it a family thing. Okay, we're going to learn CPR, and then everybody's
That's a great idea. Do it as a family.
As professionals, we are required to keep our CPR up to date, right? And we are more likely to see it, right? And we're required to do it every 2 years.
So even you,
we're
seeing it,
everybody in that hospital that's taking care of a patient, clinical in nature, we're required to. So the parents who may never see it, God forbid,
we need it even more.
Absolutely.
So that it's something that we do automatically, that we know how to handle. Malvina, something that in all my years in news I had never heard of, and as a parent, and I can't believe it, is dry drowning. A 4-year-old in Texas died this summer, unfortunately, of dry drowning. What is it? And can you do anything to prevent it?
Okay, so dry drowning, or what they're calling dry drowning, it's really a secondary injury. Okay, it is misleading in the sense because what we used to call dry drowning, there's a lot of terminology out there, but we want to make sure that we're all speaking of the same thing, right? We have our fatal drownings and our non-fatal drownings, right? And then with this dry drowning or secondary mechanism, what we have is the child who ingested or aspirated, which means they got water in the lungs, and for whatever reason their body wasn't able to get it all out there. Coffee, whatever the case may be, and that lingers, and essentially ends up being, it's like a pneumonia in sorts, where you have fluid in the lungs. Okay, so the issue that we're seeing is that statistically speaking, this will happen once it's kind of, obviously once is too many, right?
Absolutely.
But
it isn't something that's very common.
It's not very common, and unfortunately, it's scaring parents from getting their kids in the water and teaching them how to swim, and that's a problem because not only here in South Florida, but statistically in the United States, worldwide, real drowning and non-fatal and fatal.
That does happen.
That does happen way too often, and we want to prevent. That I understand it's scary, but technically, it can happen to anybody, and that's just something out of our control. What I will say, though, if your child is complaining of pain, in the chest area, or if your child, again, difference in consciousness level, or
being lethargic, is not acting himself, isn't feeling well. So that's good. That's good to keep in mind. So if your child has been in the pool for a while, or any body of water, in the ocean, and you see that they're not being themselves afterwards, just in case, maybe take them into the pediatrician.
Absolutely. You can always be proactive. And you'll get hopefully a clear bill of health and say, you're good to go, and then you have peace of mind. Absolutely. But by no means do we want children to stay out of those swimming lessons.
No.
We all know what, swallowing a little water.
Right, which is great that you made that difference for us and showed us that it isn't that they've swallowed water, they've ingested water, it's that the water goes to their lungs. So that's definitely rare, and it's
right. And then, when it does happen, the body expels it. That feeling in your nose, or the body expels it and knows what to do. Sometimes if you're a little bit compromised, it might take a little bit longer, just like with a cold. When you have mucus in the lungs type of thing, think of it that way. So it's very rare. But again, I cannot reiterate the importance of having children take swimming lessons, getting them in that water, because that, unfortunately, does happen a lot more.
It's so unfortunate. And so that's what they're doing in the summer outdoors, and that's how we can keep them safe. Let's go inside the home now. There are dangers inside our homes. We can have them at home right now with the little ones, and that is when it pertains to poisoning. What are the dangers at home?
Well, again, it's you've heard of crimes of opportunity.
Yes.
Well, these are injuries of opportunity. Because they're in the home so much more. They see things and maybe not even notice that they have not noticed in the past, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, what's that?
They have more time to explore.
So exactly, so they're exploring around the house. So one of the things that we tell parents is go ahead and get at the eye level of your child. So if that's a 2-year-old, you want to get on your hands and knees and just look at the area, look at the world through their eyes, get that perspective, and look at what can potentially
go all around
be
the house so you can see what they're seeing.
Right, and that'll keep you away from a lot of things. But when it comes to poisoning, we have the power to influence a little bit more in that we can go ahead and make certain changes. For example, drinkables, right, versus non-drinkable liquids. And I have a good example of these right here. May I have the purple one, please? For example,
I'll hold that one for you.
Okay, I just...
So this is Gatorade. Most of us have that in our home at some point.
Right.
And kids love to drink it.
There's
no danger there.
No danger right there. But then we have something like this. Okay, and when we have something like this, look at the color in that. You're going to tell me a 3-year-old's not going to think that's yummy?
Absolutely. I think there is a purple Gatorade.
There's a purple Gatorade, and there's blue
drinks,
cleaners, right? So we can no longer go by color. So we want to make sure that we make that distinction, that this is going to be further up where they're not going to be able to reach it, preferably under a lock or some kind of locking mechanism. And this, obviously, you can make it accessible to them. Another thing that happens very often, is sometimes we have a cleaning fluid, not Gatorade, right? But it's this big, heavy type of bottle, and then for our convenience as parents, we put it in another type of container. And, put it maybe in the bathroom or, wherever it is that we're going to use it, just for a quick little cleanup. And what ends up happening is the child identifies the bottle, doesn't identify the
there is no identification that it's a product for
So I've had parents tell me, oh no, I take off the label so that kids, unfortunately, exactly,
with the best of intentions,
with the best of intentions, exactly. So don't do that. That's not something that we want anybody to get used to, but we understand how that might happen, and we're just letting you know that there is a danger in that, and that we want to make sure that the child knows. And like you said, again, speak to your children. Have that conversation. Listen, honey, anything in this closet you cannot touch, okay? This is food. This is not. Again, under a locking mechanism, that would be ideal. But we all know that kids are curious and they find the know-how. So even just letting them know, that helps. Another thing that we're seeing is... Another thing that we see a lot of is during vacation time, summer included, parents, go off to work and maybe they have grandparents because of the summer camp.
A lot of them,
right? And so again, they have more access. And grandparents typically, they kind of not used to having that child all the time there. So it's a good idea to talk to the family as a whole as far as medication safety, making sure that anything that's medication is kept under lock and key. And again, and teaching your child not to pick anything up and put it in his mouth, because you never know. What he might think is a Skittle is actually,
You brought a great prop that I saw when you got here. I really want all of you to see this because it's crazy when you see them right next to each other. Take a look at this. If you can't put it right up there so they can see it. Just hold it right there for a moment.
Sure.
You look at that and you can't really tell the difference between what you're looking at. If you see they look similar, some of them are actually pills, medication, and the other are candy.
The other are candy. And if it's hard for us to tell, and we're expecting a child to tell, and the truth of the matter is that when I bring this, I don't want the kids to guess. A lot of times I'll take it to the classrooms and the kids tell me, oh, this is this. I don't want you to guess. I just want you to know you never put it in your mouth.
Period.
Period.
If there's a doubt, don't.
Yes,
When in doubt,
don't. And, you just don't want to pick something up. A lot of parents and grandparents leave their medication so that they don't forget in areas that are visible.
Most, I know mine.
Who hasn't? Who hasn't? Let's be honest. But what we want to make sure is, why don't you just write yourself a note, and then that will remind you to go get the meds.
That way you don't have it out where the children can actually have access to them.
Exactly. And the other thing is that we want you to have the poison control number. Okay. One of the things that we see is parents a lot of times will come into the hospital and unfortunately something might have already happened to the child because they waited for symptoms to come. We don't want that.
Meaning they know that the child ingested something or pill of medication they shouldn't have, but they're waiting, and if they don't see anything, they assume
they're okay. You can call the poison control number, and we have that on our links and everything else, but just as a cheat sheet, I always have all my
I love it. There's a sticker that has the number.
But the number, just so that we put it out there.
To remember?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
It's 1-800-222-1222. So, and you could always call, dial 0 or...
True. Do whatever you have to do.
Whatever you have to do to ask.
To get to them.
And a lot of times we feel like, I don't want to ask because they're going to think that I was careless. First of all, this is anonymous. They are not wanting to take your name. They are not wanting to report you to anyone. It's here because we know that it saves lives. You could tell them, my child ingested so much of this, and show them the bottle, read the bottle to them, whatever it is that because they do have a website as well. And they'll be able to tell you, okay,
you should take them in or simply wait for these symptoms or watch the child.
Exactly. That's life-saving
information. A phone call, that's it. No judgment.
And you'd be amazed how many people refrain from calling just because they're afraid.
They can save their lives.
Absolutely. They don't check your immigration status. They don't check if you have if your kids are
no judgment.
No judgment whatsoever.
They're just simply there to give you the advice that you need at that time.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. Now, for parents of teenagers, and I'm one of those, the fear when you talk about poison is alcohol poisoning. Yes. You hear it so often. And these young kids that shouldn't even be drinking in the first place, but we have to be real. So what do parents do? How do they battle that one? How do we battle that one?
Well, the same thing. Know what your stock is like. We like to entertain, and the very first thing with parents, and I have to say this is true for everything, children mimic parents. Okay, so if you are having a drink every so often, it starts to look like, hey, it's okay.
It's no big deal.
And it might be no big deal for you as a parent, as an adult, but for a child and their different bodies, it can definitely make a difference, So we want to make sure that, again, know your stock, know what you have, talk to them about the dangers of alcohol and any drug, really, because we're seeing a lot of cases where kids are getting poisoned. We think poison, we think chemicals, but drugs are a chemical. And unfortunately, sometimes we just don't even know what's in them. And, that's something that we really need to stay away from. But getting back to the things we can control in the home, have that conversation with them. And
communication is key.
Communication is key. And again, adolescents may or may not want to try certain things, but there's a reason why there is a required age to buy it.
Absolutely.
And
to drink it.
Exactly. And we have to be responsible as parents to teach them right or wrong, and also keep it out of sight. Out of sight, out of mind.
If they don't have access to it again, at least there's less of a chance.
Also, what you said earlier, having that conversation, because they might go to a friend's house where it's accessible.
You want to prepare them for if it happens, if it's presented to them.
Absolutely.
What are they going to do?
And if they're in a situation that they feel uncomfortable, but they're afraid of not looking cool or something, that what they can say, and maybe even, and we do this through a series called Safe Sitter, where we teach children how to be, adolescents, how to be safe babysitters. If they're ever in a situation that they're uncomfortable, they should have a code with that parent, so they can call and say, I'm ready to get picked up now, or whatever the code is. And on the other hand, that parent knows, doesn't ask questions, because then that would put the child in that predicament where they have to explain in front of their friends.
So if they're in a situation where maybe kids present alcohol and they're going to drink and they're not going to participate, rather than have to say, if they feel that uncomfortable, they can just pick up the phone, use that code, and they know that means mom picked me up.
Mom picked me, and mom is not going to ask her questions at that time, right? You go pick up your child, get them out of there real quick, and then, what happened.
Now, for the instances, of course, that it does happen, if it does, I want parents to have this information, which is so valuable. If they fear that their child did drink too much alcohol, what are the signs of alcohol poisoning?
Well, depending on how, if it's laced with anything else, and the signs can vary incredibly. It could go from the child being lethargic, or what they commonly call, passed out, or that kind of thing. Or it can have an opposite reaction, because again, we're seeing a lot of mixing with alcohol and drugs, and the child is extremely hyper. You could always tell. The pupils are a good sign, but that's something that us medical people, we look for. But dilated or constricted, depending on the drug. So what we want the parent to know is just kind of know your child, and if they're looking like having them pass out and drink it off, or sleep it off, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. You want to. Usually we want to hydrate that child, right, and get them to the ED or the emergency department. Absolutely.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Again, a lot of people are scared to bring them in, but you know what? I would rather bring them in and then have that conversation with them, and later.
We're in this together. We want them alive and well,
safe.
And safe.
Yes,
absolutely.
And like you said, being real as to what are the dangers out there.
Keeping it real.
Exactly.
Any other advice that you have for us, for parents out there?
Yes, so
really, for
really, we could.
Oh, but I'm so thankful because again, we're experiencing this.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things particular to the summer in other places and year-round to Florida is children dying in the vehicles due to heat stroke. Okay. As a parent, you're doing the right thing. You're putting them in their car seat. You're not letting your guard down. You're doing all the right things. But a lot of times, especially in the summer and in vacation time, our routine is off. So those changes in routine sometimes are, that mix that we need in there to make everything go wrong. And what we want to make sure is that not only don't you let your guard down of everything you're always doing, but because in South Florida, our heat index is just off the charts, 10 minutes, and here it might be even more or sooner, can make the difference between life and death for that child or brain injury. So we want to make sure that you always check the back seat of the vehicle and make sure that all the kids get out. If your husband or your partner says, okay, I'll take him out. When you're where you need to be, say, hey, where is so-and-so? Count them, make sure they have. I have 3 children of my own, 3 little ones. And sometimes I'm like, and I call them all the wrong names, or I always making fun of me, Ma. But at the end of the day, I go 1, 2, 3. And I know, like that they're there. And
I know. I remember when I started as a reporter that you would hear these stories of parents who left their child in the car. It's awful. And I remember thinking, how can that happen? And then you become a parent. And if you have multiple children, it's not that it's going to happen to you, heaven forbid, but you can start to see on some days that you're really busy, a little crazy, or like you mentioned, if your routine changes, or someone is, the father's going to pick them up, you're the one that usually does it, and things get turned around, you can see how it can happen. I think there's something also that you mentioned to me about having a certain step, maybe, for example, our purse.
Right.
We always have our purse with us. Exactly. We need it to pay for things, to do things. maybe leave it in the back seat so you won't forget that.
Absolutely. So any which way that will make you look at or visualize that back seat of the car is a good idea. I've heard everything from a purse to a shoe to,
one of your shoes, take off your shoe.
Whatever is going to work.
You can't get out of the car
Absolutely. So, but what we want that parent to do is to get into the habit of visualizing, because all these props and all these types of things, even you have apps on the phone that you could say, okay, I got to my destination, right? And they'll tell you destination is on your right, and P.S., did you get your child? Which is amazing. But the day you forget the phone, or the phone runs out of batteries, or, you're wearing sandals and you decided, then it's a day that you're not going to visualize. So what we want you to do is to get into that habit of always visualizing the backseat of that car when you get off. And, once your kids get older, you can teach them to say, hey, mommy, am I getting out? I did it for mine, and they sound, whenever I have somebody else in the car, they laugh at it. They're like, oh, yeah, of course, it would be your children. But my children say, are we getting out as a family? Or like, have you ever
Mom,
not?
remember me?
But
I know it sounds crazy, but it's not about judgment. No judgment. Mm-hmm. You never know when it can happen to you. So the important thing is take whatever steps you need to make sure that they stay safe.
Exactly. And, during the summer, don't let your guard down. I know we're all on a little bit more of a relaxed mode, and who doesn't need the relaxation? We all do. But the truth of the matter is that any of these things that we've spoken about, can just really alter that relaxation mode real quick.
But I think it's great the tips you've given us. Routine. Make certain things routine so that it's just automatic. You're doing it automatically. And certain reminders so that you won't forget. And again, like you mentioned, take the perspective of your little one. Walk around your house. I think that's wonderful. From their perspective, so you can make sure that your home is safe. And again, just to enjoy the summer. That's what we all want to do. And all year round, be safe here in South Florida.
Exactly.
Malvina, I could go on for days with you.
Oh my gosh.
You have so much information. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity.
And thank you to all of you at home. And the parents, a reminder, if you have any questions, if you fear that your child may be going through some sort of health condition, best thing always is to go to your pediatrician. They've got all the answers as well, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Hopefully you'll join us again. Thank you for joining us on Talking Kids Health. I'm Beatriz Canals. See you soon and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malvina.
Thank you.
And thank you for your props.
Oh.
The visuals always help.
And and parents like to see, how they can do it, not just abstract. So anytime you can show them something like that,
it's crazy how the pills look just like the painting.
And these pills were selected, so that we can have.
Of course, make a comparison.
But the truth of the